Good afternoon, all. This is Cassie Powers with the National Association of State Energy Officials. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar. I see that folks are still in the process of signing in, so we're going to wait a minute more and then we'll get started. Good afternoon, all. This is Cassie Powers with the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASEO. I would like to welcome you to our webinar on transportation electrification, collaboration between state energy offices, state public utility commissions, and state departments of transportation. We are very excited to be hosting a conversation with some of the EV leads in the country from the state of Michigan to hear a little bit about collaboration models in that state. This all got started when about a year or so ago, NASEO, as well as our friends at NARUC and at AASHTO, our counterparts for the PUCs and the DOTs, decided to get together and write a mini guide on transportation electrification coordination between our membership bases, the energy offices, the PUCs, and the DOTs. And there are lots of different models out there. I know that each of the agencies and states play a unique role in EV infrastructure rollout in particular, but also supporting transportation electrification more broadly. We are at a unique time. There is unparalleled federal investment in EV charging station rollout, in manufacturing for EVs. There are significant tax incentives through the IRA, as well as other infrastructure investment opportunities through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I know that many folks on the line are spending a lot of their days trying to kind of hash through what is needed to really successfully roll out transportation electrification initiatives in a strategic and efficient and equitable manner. And so we want to facilitate a conversation on how states are doing just that, how they are working across agency lines, as well as coordinating with other stakeholders in their states to support transportation electrification and advance their state's energy and transportation goals. And with that, we have a packed agenda. I'm going to turn to my counterparts at NARUC and at AASHTO to say a few words of welcome, and then we will share a little bit about our findings from the mini guide that was released last year, and then get to the good part and have a conversation with our speakers from 3 different agencies in the state of Michigan. And so with that, let me first turn it over to Sarah Fitzpatrick, excuse me, Sarah, at NARUC. Sarah?
All right, thank you, Cassie. Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Fitzpatrick. I'm a technical and policy advisor at the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, or NARUC, and I work on its team at the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, also known as CPI. And at CPI, we provide technical assistance to commissions to help them get ahead of emerging issues and connect them with expertise and strategies to help inform their decision-making. So within the world of transportation electrification, that includes providing help and resources that states are looking for, issues that states are looking into, like rate design for vehicle charging, incorporating new technologies, optimizing the value of EVs and mitigating their negative impacts, and determining siting and ownership of vehicle charging infrastructure, just to name a few. And so some of the resources and conversations that NARUC has been organizing on this topic include our EV State Working Group, which began after releasing a foundational EV paper in 2019. Our EV Working Group posts monthly meetings and posts recorded expert presentations that represent a portion of these monthly calls. In 2022, NARUC worked with NASEO and AASHTO to expand the National Council on Electricity Policy's mini guide series, which highlights and supports intra-state collaboration, and put together the mini guide that this webinar today is based on. And since I've mentioned NCEP, I wanted to introduce it to those who maybe aren't familiar. The National Council on Electricity Policy, or NCEP, is a forum for collaboration for state-level electricity decision makers to share and learn from each other. And these electricity decision makers who make up the NCEP community include utility commissions, state energy offices, air and environmental regulators, governor's offices, state legislatures, and consumer advocates. And NCEP aims to provide education, resources, and guidance to all these organizations on cross-cutting electricity issues that impact their work, like vehicle electrification. So I'll save some announcements on upcoming resources and events for the end of this webinar, but I'll ask my colleague Robert Bennett to share the link to our electric vehicle website in the chat, which has a whole list of past and upcoming resources for those who are interested, and also to share the NCEP website link, which I encourage everyone to check out. And thank you again for having us here today, and I'll pass it over to Josh.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me, Cassie and Sarah and the whole team. My name is Josh Rodriguez. I'm the Program Director for Environment at AASHTO. Our team, amongst 1,000 other pieces of our portfolio, help manage all the electrification work in transportation with AASHTO. And that includes helping NASEO and the Joint Office deploy this NEVI program that everybody's been talking about so recently. I'm very excited to listen into this discussion. I came on just as the mini guide was being deployed, so I've been working with NARUC very closely as well recently, and happy to be a partner on this working group and on this webinar.
Thanks so much, Josh and Sarah. Appreciate it. And we at NASEO have long been supporting the state energy offices as they have led EV infrastructure rollout and other transportation electrification programs. And we're very glad to enhance our coordination and collaboration with both of your associations and, of course, with your members in the states. And so before we turn to an overview of our findings from the mini guide, I do just want to make a couple of housekeeping announcements. And so I believe that all panelists, all of our attendees are on mute, but you should have access to the chat. And so you can send in questions through either the Q&A feature or the chat on the webinar. You can also reach out to me or to Delaney with any questions via our emails, and we can drop those in the chat as well to help with anything. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Delaney Dixon here at NASEO. She's our Clean Transportation Program Manager and was the lead author of the mini guide to share some of our findings. Delaney?
Great, thanks, Cassie. So again, my name is Delaney. I'm the Clean Transportation Program Manager here at NASEO. Going to provide a brief overview of the EV mini guide on state agency collaboration on transportation electrification planning that NASEO, NARUC, and AASHTO released last fall, sharing a few of the key findings ahead of the discussion with our panelists. So with historic investment in EV infrastructure across states, NASEO, NARUC, and AASHTO wanted to investigate each agency's role in supporting transportation electrification, identifying cross-agency collaboration models, and identifying that value of leveraging each agency's strengths, as well as highlighting best practices and lessons learned from the states. So we interviewed state DOT, state energy office, and state public utility commission officials from 3 states, Utah, Florida, and Michigan. And Michigan is obviously on the line today, and we'll hear from them in just a bit to gain more insight on how cross-agency collaboration plays out in their state and ways that they can continue to collaborate on NEVI, the charging and fueling infrastructure program, and future EV charging programs. So the panelists will describe in greater detail the unique role their respective agency plays in transportation electrification, but to level set, I'll provide a general overview of each state agency's role in transportation electrification based on our findings. So on the slide right here, you'll see just the 3 main key themes that we were trying to define when we began the mini guide. And then you'll see just a little screenshot of the publication that you can find, I think, in the chat as well as on NASEO's website. So in the next slide, I'll go over just a general kind of overview of what state agencies' roles typically are in EV infrastructure planning. So with state energy offices, in the next slide, are tasked with advising governors and legislatures in developing EV policies and programs. They play a large role in convening state agencies, private sector, infrastructure developers, and automakers to build consensus and identify different funding opportunities. And then they also assist with creating state EV roadmaps. State DOTs are the designated agency for the disbursement of nebula formula funds. So they partner with state energy offices and other agencies on EV rollout, as well as contributing to regional EV committees, as well as contributing to those state EV roadmaps as well. State PUCs oversee the utility's role in EV infrastructure, siting, and charger ownership, like Sarah was mentioning. They approve or deny utility investments to support EV deployment and determine rate designs and other load management strategies for EV charging. So with this context in mind, I'll explain some of the key findings from the interviews we conducted. So in the next slide, first is that state DOTs, energy offices, and state PUCs all play a unique role in transportation electrification. And it's really vital to identify what that role is, so agencies can really leverage relevant strengths among their partners. So for example, state DOTs can lean on state energy office to fill knowledge gaps related to the EV industry, such as how different funding mechanisms have been used in the past. State energy offices can then rely on state DOTs, transportation planning and modeling expertise to ensure the transportation and siting considerations are addressed during federal infrastructure investments. And then state POCs, the state decision makers when it comes to designing consumer rates, utility business models, and other utility investments for investor-owned utilities. So state energy offices and state DOTs can provide valuable information to their POCs to aid in the regulatory decision-making processes. So those are just a few examples of the different state agencies leveraging one another's expertise in the areas to support EV infrastructure planning. Second is formal collaboration is necessary and valuable. So there are numerous strategies that foster formal collaboration that we discovered, such as creating joint offices that convene leaders across governments in the private sector. That can be really valuable in enhancing discussions between agencies. And our panelists can dive deeper into what that looks like in their state. Some examples include executive orders that mandate cross-agency collaboration on a statewide EV master plan, like in Florida. And that can really establish a formal working relationship between agencies that might not have existed before and might not have been as strong before. So thirdly, is informal collaboration is also valuable. So having the ability to easily reach out to key EV leaders and other state agencies really allows each agency to stay informed on the agency's goals and priorities, and allows each agency to share their respective expertise. Lastly, including public and private sectors is valuable in increasing the co-benefits of transportation electrification. So since the benefits are relevant to many government agencies and entities, institutions, it's important to really include that broad range of stakeholders into the conversation. So looking at health agencies, environmental agencies, workforce boards, universities, et cetera, including them in the conversation is also really critical to building a diverse, equitable, strategic EV charging network. And our panelists will also describe the multi-stakeholder engagement process in greater detail as well during the conversations today. But with all of that, I'll hand it over to Cassie to facilitate the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right, with that, we're going to invite our panelists to turn on their screen, and I'm going to stop my share, and so that way you'll be able to kind of see the folks in real time. Just to let everybody know, we are going to structure this as really a conversation between three of the EV leaders in the state of Michigan. Very excited to welcome our three panelists: Julie Stavelin, the Assistant Division Director at Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy with the Energy Office. Julie, wonderful to have you. We're also pleased to be joined by Catherine Fitzpatrick, the Commissioner at the Michigan Public Service Commission, as well as Niles Annalyn, the Policy Section Manager at the Michigan Department of Transportation. So I'm very pleased to have all three of you with us today to share a little bit about the activities in the transportation electrification space in the state of Michigan and how your three agencies are working with one another. And so I'm going to ask you to just kick us off by telling us a little bit about your agency's role in the transportation electrification space. And Julie, I'm going to start with you.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Really happy to be here. So our office is the state designated energy office within the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And our role in the transportation electrification space has kind of been filling in the gaps of the traditional install the EV charger. So back in 2017, 2018, we knew that EV chargers were coming, electric vehicles were coming. We had limited amount of resources, but we had the VW settlement funds that were coming in. And so we wanted to make sure that we were being good stewards of those funds and really wanting to not wait for that investment in EVs. We wanted to go ahead and provide the charging station. So we weren't going to wait for, the uptick of the, the chicken or the egg. Are we waiting for the vehicles to come, or are we waiting for the chargers? So we decided to tackle the chargers aspect of it. And the way we approached that is we started with the optimized EV charger placement plan. And this is a comprehensive plan that we did on a research basis with Michigan State University that identified the optimal locations for EV chargers throughout the state. We looked at highway corridors and tourism areas, as well as urban communities. And this process was driven by stakeholders, and it took an analytical approach to optimizing the placement of EV charger stations statewide. With the limited amount of funding that we have, how could we develop that bare bone network to get from point A to point B throughout the state? And so what this really did is this led into the development of our Charge Up Michigan program. So Charge Up Michigan is a EV charger placement grant program that aims to build out the EV infrastructure throughout the state for the DCFCs, the direct current, fast charging stations from Michigan, from Detroit all the way up to Copper Harbor. And so we looked at that, based off of the modeling that we had from the optimized EV charger placement plan, where were these chargers located? And this is also in partnership with our utilities and site hosts throughout the state. And to date, we have approximately 276 charging stations that have been deployed. With match funding from the utilities and site hosts and our VW funding, we've invested approximately $16.1 million in EV charging stations, and we've got about $4.5 million remaining in this program that we're still building out. While this was taking place, we kicked off the Charge Up Michigan in 2018, early 2019. We also wanted to look at it from a planning standpoint, right? So we partnered with the University of Michigan to develop a planning and zoning database. And so this is a free database that looked at all 1,856 jurisdictions throughout the state. And it's designed as a resource for elected officials, government employees, planners, developers, and as well as Michigan residents. And it identifies which communities have considered, say, renewable energy, whether it's commercial or residential, but also looking at EVs in their zoning ordinances, and then which level of government has that zoning authority. So this zoning guide is available. It's on our website. It's free, it's easy to access, and it's updated on an annual basis. And the idea behind it was not only for developers and entities to see who had zoned it, but also for communities to learn from their peers within the state. And then we also conducted a survey, which is Michigan Local Energy Survey, the MILE survey. And this was sent out also to our 1,856 local jurisdictions to kind of see where they were assessing EVs in their plans. This was done in the fall of 2019. And what we found out was that actually only 2% of Michigan jurisdictions reported that they had planned or to enact or had enacted policies to fund or incentivize the use of EVs. 2% of 1,856 jurisdictions, that was not a big one. So, when we look at this, the cost of planning for EVs, right, when you're looking at pavement and retrofitting like a parking lot, it costs almost 2.5 times more to retrofit a parking lot for EV charging infrastructure, compared to what it would have cost to just do that in the beginning and the early planning stages. So we use that data as a way to develop some education and stakeholder engagement with our local jurisdictions to help them understand how they can plan for this adoption of EV chargers, get them on board, and understand the cost ramifications of not planning for this. So we've also been working with MDOT on the Lake Michigan circuit, which looks at destinations around Lake Michigan for EV charging infrastructure. Kind of based off of the Charge Up Michigan model, what are the ideal locations based off of the tourist destinations? Where does it make sense for utility infrastructure to go into place? And so we're working on building that one out. And then we also are incorporating our grid resiliency program, looking at how that can support our EV electrification program. So that's kind of where we are at with the State Energy Office.
Thanks, Julie. Just a few things going on there. And so very much looking forward to kind of digging into the details of some of these programs and how y'all are working together on them. So with that, Catherine, let me turn to you. Tell us a little bit about the PSC's role in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And thanks for having me. This is exciting. So part of my privilege of being on the commission and being a commissioner is that I'm a part of the NARUC community, and part of what Sarah described with the EV state working group. I'm the chair of the electric vehicle state working group that's part of NARUC, and I just wanted to highlight what a great place that is for collaboration on electric vehicle issues. If you are, I know that we have a lot of state participation on the call right now. So if you are a commissioner on the staff of a utility commission in the US, highly recommend that you join that. I know Cassie placed a link in the chat. It's a really great opportunity for all state commissions to get together once per month and talk about any questions or challenges that are happening with EVs. And it has been incredibly beneficial for me to talk through the details of like rate design and what other states are doing, understand what incentives are going on, what other pilot programs are happening in other states, and be able to really learn from them. So that's that's actually one part of my role as a commissioner, and part of what we see in the automotive or transportation electrification space. But I also want to start off my introduction by saying that I just took my first road trip in my EV today. So I got a Mustang Mach-E last fall, and I've been loving it. It's a great car. I've driven it extensively for the last 6 months, just to work, visit family, friends around town, that sort of thing. But today was my first actual road trip, and my attempt to be brave and go past the 300-mile range that the vehicle has, and it went great. I will no problems. Found a fast charger along the way. I'm in Alpena, Michigan right now, which is well, you'll find out that a few things about Michigan, and one of them that we use our hand as a map because Michigan looks like a mitten. So I'm like right here right now. I normally live down here. So it was a long drive, and it went great, but I felt like this was an appropriate place to share that. So, but at the commission, we oversee the utility role in electric vehicle infrastructure. So, with siting and charger ownership, and really ensuring a competitive market for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And, fundamentally, our role is as an economic regulator. So that is really to approve or deny utility investments to support electric vehicle deployment. So that can be either through pilot programs or through full investments that are evaluated as a part of rate cases. So we also determine rate designs and other load management strategies for electric vehicle charging. But our role can also be more broad than that. And one of the really valuable abilities that we have at the commission that I have come to learn over my last 2.5 years as a part of this body is that of convening power. So that's essentially the ability to get everyone in the same room and make people talk to each other. And that has been incredibly valuable in the EV space, because so much of what we're doing really comes down to communication and to planning. And just being able to leverage that convening power has been really helpful. But in addition to that, we also work closely across other state departments and support in their work in developing the charging infrastructure corridors that Julie was describing. We've held collaboratives to bring automakers together with charging infrastructure developers and utilities and other stakeholders. And we've also convened a few work groups specifically around data and system and access of that data, and a grid integration study to make recommendations to improve the accessibility of hosting capacity on the distribution grid to support the development of fast charging infrastructure. So those are just a couple examples that are hopefully a little bit different from what Julie talked about, and probably hopefully a little bit different from what Niles will talk about too, so we can get a bit of a broad range and understand some of the different things that we're working on in addition to the things that we do together.
Thanks, Catherine, and congrats on your first EV road trip and very on brand with a Mustang. So kudos. All right, Niles, I'll turn to you. Tell us a little bit about the role of the DOT.
Sure. But first, I'm right here right now. So, so my introduction will be much shorter because MDOT's history with EVs is considerably shorter than the other agencies on the webinar today. So our primary role began with the passage of the IIJA and the development of the NEVI program. So at this time, we're obviously working with our partners to administer the program, but also to maintain Title 23 compliance, which has, I'm sure many people on this call have realized is kind of a challenge because this is a very unique type of program and not your traditional FHWA or DOT program. But no, we've been working very closely with our partners. We've come to realize that MDOT, again, was the most suited agency to do this work. We had tried a different path earlier and just found that despite all the, great work that Julie mentioned with the Charge Up Michigan program, we were originally trying to use that as a model, but it just wasn't coming together. But anyway, so we have don't have a whole lot of experts in the EV space. So that's, again, why we have these partners on the team here. We couldn't get anywhere where we are without the experience of the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, without Eagle, and without the PSC. So that's been a major boon to our work. Beyond the NEVI program, we are always trying to be cutting edge or innovative. So we were working with other partners, Electrion and Eagle, to work on testing one of the first inductive charging vehicles and test beds in the nation, I believe, in the state. So that's been a major advancement in EV. Now that we're in this new world of electric vehicles, I would say the department is quickly becoming on board and learning and hiring and just really trying to figure out what it means to DOTs. We're not quite sure yet, to be honest. Before, we used to just look at revenue, but now we're looking to see how we can try to support state policies, federal policies, national goals, et cetera. So it's a very exciting time.
Fantastic. And, that kind of leads us into this next question that I have really for all of you. But Niles, you had mentioned that you all are working together on some inductive charging. Can you highlight some other examples of kind of the working relationship between your three agencies?
Yeah, so right from the get-go, when the NEVI program was announced, we convened the multi-agency partnership, knowing that we couldn't do it in a silo, knowing that MDOT did not have the expertise, but that all these different agencies around the state were very advanced and very much actively working in the EV space. So we brought everybody together, and a specific example, if we hadn't done that, if we had tried to do this on our own, I can't imagine how long it would have taken us to figure out just how much power a DC fast charger station takes. So we would have been in the dark with that because that's really not our world. And it was, the assistance from Julie and her team that kind of opened our eyes to just how powerful these stations are and what it really takes to coordinate with the utilities.
Fantastic. And Julie and Catherine, anything to add, other examples you'd like to highlight of the working relationship? Oh, and Julie, you're on mute.
Sorry. I think, like Niles said, we meet almost on a weekly basis, bi-weekly. We meet weekly pretty much.
Weekly.
Most of it, most of it is focused on NEVI right now. And what we're really trying to do, Title 23, it's got all the different kinds of regulations, right, that FHWA has to follow with that funding. We do with DOE funding. We don't follow those requirements, so we really had to shift how we were working and rolling out this program, because we were initially thinking, before a lot of the rules and regulations came out, was awesome. This is going to fit in really nicely with what we've done with Charge Up. We'll build it out. We'll really be able to expand that network and really get that going. We can hit the ground running because we've been doing this for 4 years already, but realizing that there's a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that we don't have the experience in, but MDOT obviously does. We're like, okay, cool. MDOT, here's what we learned with Charge Up. Here's how we work with the utilities. Here's how we work with the site hosts. Here's issues that we've run up against. Here are some of the speed bumps that are in the way, so that they can take that as they're designing and implementing their program, which follows that title, the Title 23 requirements. So We're on a joint evaluation committee looking at applications, co-designing the RFP, and really kind of bridging that, that gap between our agencies to build on the strength of what we've already got going in the state. So I would say it's a great relationship that we've developed, and I'm excited for where the state is going in this program.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with everything that both Niles and Julie said, and just want to build on how important this has been for us. I was at a conference, it was one of the NARUC conferences, and it was a conversation about electric vehicles with a room of probably, I don't know, it was a main stage room, full room, let's say 600 people in it with, I don't know, let's say 40 commissioners or so in the front rows there. And one of the panelists, he was a head of a DOT for one of the states. He polled the room. This is a room full of commissioners and commission staff and anyone who's interested in the regulatory utility commission arena, which tends to be just us. So he polled the room and said, how many of you commissioners or commission staff have talked to one of your counterparts at your DOTs? I was the only commissioner to raise my hand out of like 40 in the room. And I kind of quickly scanned the room behind me to see who else was raising their hand. There were maybe 10 hands up in that room. So it is, I'm really excited that we've had this longer standing relationship across state agencies. But if you don't, you're not alone. So you can start now and start building that. It's not unusual to not have those conversations going already. And I want to credit the establishment of the Office of Future Mobility. I think that's a big part of what initiated a lot of the cross-agency collaboration and communication. And our first in the nation chief mobility officer, who would pull us all in and ask questions about our respective areas, and how much power does this take? What should be one of our goals for the energy use of these electric vehicles, and that we're all able to contribute to what we call our future mobility plan. And that plan is updated on a yearly basis. And one of those pillars, for example, that the commission was able to contribute to was the establishment of a goal to have over 80% of charging occur off peak. And that was one thing that we thought was really important for maintaining the electric grid and maintaining the integrity and really being able to utilize the electric vehicles in a positive way for the system.
Fantastic. I know that you and Niles both and Julie have all mentioned the Office of Future Mobility. And so can you talk a little bit about kind of coordination with other agencies? So we're talking a lot about Energy Office, PSC, DOT coordination, but who else are you working with? And also if you could share a little bit about, I think it was the governor's directive that required interagency collaboration on Infrastructure Act investments. So if you could share a bit, that'd be great.
I can get started. Yeah, so the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's an offshoot of our Economic Development Corporation, MEDC. And it was really created to really hone in on the automotive and battery and AV, automated vehicles, EV vehicles, et cetera, to really hone in on all the innovation that takes place in Michigan and really try to focus that energy into a positive for the residents and businesses in the state. That's kind of my elevator pitch. Julie or Catherine, if you want to elaborate, feel free.
I'm going to let Catherine take this one.
Okay, sure. I can elaborate briefly. So it really, Michigan is the automotive state, right? Like we're the home of the original big three automakers, and a huge portion of our economy and the jobs that we have in Michigan are in some way related to auto manufacturing and automotive design and automotive engineering. And so I think this was a really important foresight into, the automotive industry is changing. How are we planning for that, and how are we going to change with it? And the Office of Future Mobility was created with that in mind. And that office also has a council, and this council for future mobility is comprised of many different members, and those members include automotive manufacturers like Ford and Toyota, Stellantis, General Motors. It includes academic members like the University of Michigan and Michigan State University. It includes political members, so the Senate Majority Leader, Minority Leader, House Majority Leader, Minority Leader for the state of Michigan. It includes other groups such as the Clean Fuels Michigan group, the UAW, United Auto Workers, the Labor Union. And then it also includes a host of different agencies. So the Treasury, Department of Treasury, it includes the Public Service Commission. I'm on the council. It includes the Economic Development Corporation, the Department of Transportation, the Department of EGLE, Energy, Great Lakes and Environment, where Julie is housed, and Labor and Economic Development, and then also the Office of the Governor. So we do coordinate really closely with the Governor's office as well when we're talking through all of these plans. But really, the fundamental purpose of this council with all of these different bodies is to create that plan, that future mobility plan. And the three pillars that this year's plan has is the transition and growth of our mobility industry and workforce. So again, like getting back to Michigan as that automotive state with our huge ties to the automotive industry and manufacturing and design in particular. The second pillar is to provide safer, greener, and more accessible transportation infrastructure. And then the third and final one is to lead the world in mobility and electrification policy and innovation. So these are ambitious goals, but each one is broken down a little bit further so we can really bring everybody together, start having that conversation and plan for the future.
Yes, I think you had also asked about the Michigan Infrastructure Office, with Catherine alluded to, but yes, that's been created in the governor's office to really help coordinate infrastructure development and coordinate infrastructure across all assets. So it's not just transportation and infrastructure, but it looks at all infrastructure in the state of Michigan, which has proven to be very important. They help us ensure that we're not missing any funding opportunities. They help facilitate communication between departments, and they really bring us together, as I think was alluded to make sure that we're headed in the right direction and provide any advice that they can give.
Fantastic. And coordination could be a tagline.
Yeah.
Associations on the line. So you're speaking my language. And so, Julie, you alluded to coordinating with other states as well. I know that there's great work happening between your three offices, but what are you all doing to work with your neighbors on the Michigan Circuit and other initiatives?
Yeah, so right now we're finishing up essentially the way the EV planning works, right? When you're planning out the best locations for where we should offer grants for the EV chargers, is we develop nodes, right? And that's where the MSU study comes into play, looking at all the data and where the businesses are and where the utility lines are. So right now we finished up the Michigan side of the things, and we're working with Wisconsin to work on the west side of Lake Michigan to get those data nodes. And so we're providing that service to Wisconsin. And then we're also working with, of course, Illinois and Indiana to get that whole circuit built. But we also, when I was talking about the zoning database earlier, we actually are providing match for a federal grant that the University of Michigan got to essentially replicate that process of the zoning database for the entire Midwest. So that includes, Wisconsin and Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, and so that they can incorporate that, so that we're looking at that as a whole picture for the Midwest, which has been a great relationship. And then just kind of sharing our experience with the different state energy offices and how we partner with our DOTs and how we kind of collaborate. And, the other thing too that we try to look at is we all have different pots of funding. We all have different sorts of expertise. None of the infrastructure money that's coming out of either IIJ or IRA is enough. right? It's a lot, but it's still not enough. So the idea is, with the focus of like NEVIs in one area, we can put Charge Up Michigan in another area. We can use some of our state energy dollars in another area, you know, and really try and flush it out to build it out so that we're all kind of taking little chunks out of the problem to get us where we need to go for that electrified transportation.
Excellent. Niles and Catherine, anything to add on the multi-state coordination?
Well, I can highlight another program that MDOT's not leading, but was led by the Office of Future Mobility that I think is quite important and interesting. It's referred to as Rev Midwest. I'm sure there are folks on this call that are probably a part of it, but it's a collaboration compact between Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, and Indiana that's really trying to create a market for regionalized EV charging, similar to what Julie was saying. But this is more, I believe, in the medium and heavy duty space. And it's also an opportunity to create region-wide industry jobs and, you know, ensure future interstate commerce and interstate travel. We also, it's a little tangential, but it's also something that I'm pretty proud of, is we're partnering with the National Park Service to fully decarbonize the 3 federal parklands on Lake Superior, including a 4th one in Minnesota. But that's an exciting project, and they hope to be the first in the nation to decarbonize in the next 4 years. And it happens to be in our state, and they're some of our crown jewels of nature and tourism. So I'm very happy to hear that coming through.
Fantastic. Well, a question also really about what Michigan is doing to address equity in transportation. And I know that, Julie, you had mentioned reaching out, doing some significant stakeholder engagement. And Catherine, you've been convening a lot of stakeholders through various processes. And Niles, I know that there's a lot of engagement opportunities through the NEVI program, but would love to just kind of hear a broader perspective on what your offices are doing to make sure that programs and policies are being designed in an equitable way. Catherine, perhaps I'll start with you.
Yeah, for sure. This is something that we think about a lot at the Public Service Commission, and in particular about the rate impacts for everybody else, non-EV owners, on expanding the electric vehicle infrastructure. So if one of our utilities wants to invest in expanding, maybe getting sites ready for a private company to install an electric vehicle charger, or if they want to provide some of that charging infrastructure themselves, or make any sort of investments in the electric grid to enable electric vehicles, how does that affect the maybe lower income people who don't have an electric vehicle and don't plan on buying one, or maybe don't have a vehicle at all? But they still have to pay their electric bill. Should they be funding that through paying for their electricity that they're using in their home? So that's something that we've been spending a lot of time thinking about, both at our commission and on the electric vehicle state working group through NARUC. And we actually just had a really interesting conversation about this in our last meeting. And that's something that we want to be able to keep that laser focus on, and be able to find the best research for how does this affect everybody, because it's not just that additional infrastructure that needs to be paid for. The increased usage of electricity has the opposite effect on your electric bills. The more electricity that everyone uses, especially during off-peak hours, the lower the cost gets. So where is that tipping point between the investment on one end of making sure that the grid can support the electric vehicles, and then that downward pressure on the other end of the increased usage driving down the overall cost of electricity for those those more disadvantaged, lower income electric users? So that's something that I think is super interesting, and that there's a lot of research happening right now, and something that I really want to make sure that we are making very smart decisions on. There's also a a pretty large effort right now happening around electric school buses to enable, greater electrification of school buses for, for lower income communities too. This is something that we've seen in proposed in some of our rate cases as well. We actually, in one of our last rate cases that is closed, so I can talk about it. We provided for financing for up to 5 transportation bus batteries. So not for school buses, but for transportation buses. That would be able to pay back over time, pay the utility back over time. The municipalities who are buying the buses pay the utility back over time, and then enable that electrification of those buses in those lower income communities as well. So, and then there's also been a lot of focus from the Council for Future Mobility looking at policies to enable further electrification of public transit. So, that's a. And then one other thing, sorry, one other piece to it too is there's in one of our other rate cases with one of our major utilities, there was an income eligible rebate. So providing low income households with a rebate of an additional $1,500 for the purchase or lease of a new electric vehicle that costs $50,000 or less. So the utility who has that program is establishing qualifying parameters such as limited rebate eligibility to households with incomes lower than, I think it's 400% of the federal poverty line, to allow for some extra incentives and to those who are participating in other income eligible government assistance programs. So there are ways of helping to level that playing field a little bit, and it's something that we just really, you just need to keep it front of mind, right? Like in everything that we're doing, we're asking ourselves the question of like, how is this affecting equity and environmental justice when it comes to these major decisions that we're making.
Great. And we did just get a quick question in the chat. If you can remember what communities those buses went to. And if not, that's fine. Just a question if it was at the top of your head.
I cannot, sorry.
All right. So another question that's come in is just, I'm wondering if you can chat a little bit about how your 3 agencies have been collaborating on tackling infrastructure for medium and heavy duty vehicles. I know we've been talking a lot about kind of the light duty world. It's been in front of everyone's minds recently. But Julie, perhaps can turn to you to start us off with this.
Yeah, the way that we've really been, and sorry, I'm going to actually go back to the prior question and just put in a little pivot. The other thing that we're thinking about in terms of low income is multifamily homes and people who maybe don't have garages or don't have access to some of the other charging where they're going to be charging off peak. So looking at like utility pole and street pole charging, how does that work in multifamily and like the shared parking areas? So looking at doing some studies in that respect and how we can help kind of tackle that aspect. But in terms of your question of the medium and heavy duty vehicles, we're actually coming at it from the fleet switching perspective. So we're trying, because the technology is kind of like, that chicken and the egg, tech's not really quite there yet. So we're looking at providing incentives to entities that are wanting to transition their diesel vehicles over to electric for those heavy duty and medium duty vehicles. So we do that both with our VW funding through our fuel transformation program. We're using EPA DARA dollars through our clean diesel program. So we're kind of tackling it, from the vehicle perspective rather than the charging infrastructure, but one step at a time in that respect.
Yeah, I would say it's very early days and we're still investigating the best course forward. I know at MDOT, we're just beginning the effort internally of looking at our equipment to see, what could be converted to what type of fuel type and functionality, et cetera. So still very early.
That's great. Well, another question that's come in is just if your offices can share a little bit about if and how you're supporting electrification at ports and airline hubs and other off-road applications.
So that goes back to how we're supporting it on the other end beyond just the EV chargers. So we're using the other half of our Volkswagen settlement dollars through our fuel transformation program. We actually have an RFP open right now that goes through November 1st. That's specifically targeting our airports and ports to electrify some of that cargo equipment handling, some of the smaller vehicles and get those electrified. And then there's some internal working groups that are kicking off right now, looking at ports specifically and how we can decarbonize our ports. And there's a crossover between, you know, the EV chargers that can not only charge EVs, but they can also charge boats and they can charge snowmobiles. So looking at that comprehensive picture on how those can all kind of play together and make use of the resources that we have.
And go ahead.
No, it's a little out of my wheelhouse. So I think Julie hit the nail on the head.
Fantastic. Well, I do want to ask you three too about any lessons learned that you've had from working with each other and across agency lines to support transportation electrification. I know we've heard a lot of great examples of the work that's happening, but any kind of lessons that you'd like to share with other states on the line?
I can kick it off unless somebody else wants to. I would say terminology. When we first started working together, all of our different industries, all of our different departments have, as all industries do, just a plethora of acronyms, and taking the time to make sure that we were talking about the same thing. I didn't know the utility world. I didn't know the EV world. I knew the transportation world. And as we were going back and forth about even the concept of Title 23, you know, it's just taking the time to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that we're listening to each other and we're not just talking past each other thinking we've got a solution, and 2 weeks down the line we're both like, well, what happened there? When did we make that decision? So I would say just, you know, taking the time to explain your business to your partners and just really nailing down the yes, we're on the same page. And also knowing who the expert is. You know, if there's the expert in the room, give them the floor to speak. That's another thing I think we learned, which I will now do.
Yeah, that was well said, Niles. So over communicate. I think that's one of the lessons learned that I've certainly come away with, is don't assume that other people know what you're doing, even though, you know, thinking about electric vehicle rate design is something that I do constantly. It's not something that Niles or Julie does constantly, and you know, sometimes you tend to forget that and assume that everybody else has that same understanding that you do, and it's not true, because they have a million other things to be thinking about. So I think that over communication and those regular check-ins to just make sure that you're really having that that coordination. But then one other thing that I think is a really good lesson learned that has really spurred all of this and has led to the success that we've had in this communication in Michigan is just having that central goal that everyone is working towards. And that central goal in Michigan came through our Healthy Climate Plan, and which is a goal to have, I think it's 2 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. And then there's also the future mobility plan that I talked through, the 3 pillars of that future mobility plan already, which have some very specific, tangible, you know, measurable goals that really just centralizes everyone's work, and everyone is really just trying to make progress towards that that central goal for the state.
Fantastic. And Julie, any lessons?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, it's like, you know, Niles and Catherine both said, it's utilizing the strengths of each of our partners, right? So having that open and honest dialogue and conversation, and recognizing, you know, that they are the experts in their fields and they recognize our expertise, and being willing to share that, and then really partnering together. I think breaking down of the silos, especially with this infrastructure funding that's coming through, has been really important, because there's a lot of overlap in many of these programs. I mean, you look at any of the NOFOs that are out there, every single one of them mentions workforce development. I mean, it's almost guaranteed, and every single program is going to have some sort of connection to another one. So knowing what each of our areas is working on, how it all kind of correlates together in that like ginormous Venn diagram, it really allows us to see how we can support each other. So like recently there was the application that just closed for the CFI for that supplemental NEVI program. You know, we pulled together our stakeholders, we got some community buy-in, and we helped support MDOT's submission of another application for that. You know, so we can partner on our strengths and really team up to really go after a lot of that funding and really put our state forward as a leader, and really serve what our residents and our communities need.
Fantastic. Well, this will be our final question, but I'm wondering if you three can tell us a little bit about what's coming next. You know, we've talked about the excellent work that you've done thus far, and I think taking a peek into the future, but how are your agencies going to be working together to support EVs and transportation electrification in the next 5 years? Julie, we'll start with you.
So that's a great question, Cassie. And honestly, like, I'm pretty sure everybody on this call has heard this. It's like drinking out of a fire hose. So I don't know how much I've been able to see past the water, like shooting at my face while I'm trying to drink out of the water hose. But what I would see is, you know, once we actually get this funding and the dollars are on the street and we're building out the NEVI, it's the what next. So what are the areas that aren't being served and how can we tweak our programs to fill those gaps? And then it's going to be okay, we've got the infrastructure. How do we help support our communities and our residents with the adoption of the EVs? You know, understanding how the tax credits work. How do we get our auto manufacturers in the state to, you know, bring more in and offer those sales and everything, and how that ties together? And then how do we continue to build that workforce out, right? We're going to need mechanics on the EV chargers. We're going to need them for the vehicles. We're going to need, you know, all that other respect. And it all plays a part together. And then how do you prioritize that with everything else that's coming? You know, with the home energy rebate programs, with the grid resiliency programs, it's going to be a lot of shuffling. So figuring out what's the top priority and how we can best work together to leverage those funds.
Absolutely. Prioritization is the name of the game right now. And Catherine, any words on the future of the collaboration between your three agencies?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just really working to continue this dialogue and to continue the open lines of communication through the established infrastructure office and the Office of Future Mobility, but also just now that we have these relationships and we know who each other are and what the expertise is just building those relationships stronger too. So really just, you know, continuing that dialogue, monitoring the deployment and monitoring the progress that we're able to make and adjusting based on the data that's coming in, allowing access to that data so we can get more and better ideas, and you know, continuing to really work through any additional issues that come up. So infrastructure needs, supply chain implications and constraints, barriers to multifamily dwellings, like Julie mentioned earlier, and continuing just the focus on making sure that we have proper rate design and proper protection for all of our low-income communities, and really working to keep equity and environmental justice in the forefront.
Excellent. Niles, close us out.
I really couldn't add anything more. I think Catherine and Julie, you covered it quite well. All I would add is the NEVI program's not over just because we put out some RFPs. This is going to be a long 5+ year operation, and we'll have to, you know, at least in that perspective, keep the group together as we go through the O&M phase and the construction phase. So that's all I'll say.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to Julie and to Catherine and to Niles for joining us and sharing some of your insights. You three are really leaders in the EV space, and we appreciate you sharing a little bit about the model of collaboration in Michigan. Before we do close out, I know we're already at the top of the hour, but just wanted to share a couple of announcements for people that are staying on the line. We do hope that many of you will join us at the EV Charging Infrastructure National Conference that NASEO and AASHTO are hosting in partnership with the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation here in the Washington, D.C. area on July 13th and 14th. For any questions, feel free to reach out, and we'll drop a link to the conference in the chat as well. Also, just wanted to turn it over to Sarah at NARUC for a couple of announcements as well. Sarah.
Thank you, Cassie, and I'll be quick. There are 3 items. NARUC will be releasing a Getting Started guide for PUCs on transportation electrification. NARUC will also be releasing a briefing guide for commissions on NEVI. That'll be focused on what utility investment request commissions are likely going to see and when. And then finally, September 26th through 28th, NSEP will be hosting its annual meeting, which will be focused on affordability, but it will also include an EV site visit and half-day workshop around vehicle electrification. And that is open to all N-Group stakeholders. So if anybody liked hearing about the collaboration on today's call, it'll be a great event to go to. So you can contact me or Robert Bennett for more information, and be looking at our website. And I don't know if Josh also wanted to have some announcements.
Nope, no announcements from me, but I do want to thank everybody. This was a great conversation. And so next time we have to deploy technology to change the face of transportation, I think we'll be set. So thanks, everybody.
All right. Thanks again to all for joining, and special thanks to our team from Michigan. Have a good day.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.